Hey there, welcome to Resource Stage Study Hall. Um, just a quick note off the top, if you're joining us from Teams, we will be monitoring the chat, so if you have any questions, that kind of stuff, Jordan is in the back, and he'll pass those questions along and we can chat about that. We're not going to be monitoring the chat for Facebook and YouTube, so just kind of keep that in mind. So welcome. Today we're going to be talking about lighting, kind of just really basic fundamentals of lighting. It's not going to be a big detailed tech dive, more just what you need to know to get started. Some schools, small theaters, that type of thing, you might have some lights kind of just sitting around and you want to maybe know how to use them, what they're for, what the different types of lights are. So this is going to be kind of just very fundamental stuff like that. So we're kind of going to be working under the assumption that you have a handful of lights, a basic console, maybe a couple accessories, gobos, that kind of stuff, and we'll talk about what those all mean and how to use them. So to start it off, the main purpose of stage lighting itself. So you're kind of looking for two different things when you're lighting an area or a stage. You're looking to both obviously light it so folks can be seen, but there's also a certain amount of creativity involved with that as well. So kind of keeping those two things in mind and how you can achieve that with the handful of lights that you have. So to get started, we're actually going to hang a light because that is where you're going to get started. So most lights, actually before we hang this, we're going to talk about it before we hang it. So most lights are going to get hung with a C-clamp. That's kind of what we use for most of our rental and sales fixtures. And so on the C-clamp here, you will see there are a couple different components. There is the main bolt that connects to the light, just down here if my hand isn't covering it for the camera. There is another bolt, kind of diagonal, going this way, and that is what secures it to the pipe. And then there's a third bolt, this little guy on the side. Not all C-clamps will have this. It's kind of hard to see with the way, maybe if I spin it. There's a little bolt on the side here. If you release that bolt, you can then spin freely, independent of this other piece down here. So you're not loosening your fixture, you're just releasing this middle piece, so you can adjust the fixture once it's hung. Not all C-clamps have that though, so you might have a C-clamp that looks a little more like this, has that bottom bolt, has that attaching bolt there, but it's one solid piece of metal, so it does not have a bolt on the side. But either way, you're probably going to have something that looks kind of like that to hang your light. So when you go ahead to hang your light, you're going to want a C-wrench to get it nice and tight. I'm probably going to be using this most of the time today. It's just a little light tightening tool. I think this is by the Light Source. I just find it really handy because you don't have to be adjusting your C-wrench. But whatever you got to tighten those bolts. So you're going to loosen off this top bolt here, this diagonal one that we were just talking about, and you're just going to drop your light on there. Don't take your hands off of it until you've tightened that bolt back down, until it's nice and tight on the pipe, because you don't want your light to fall. So I'm just going to tighten that up, and then once it's hand tight, I'm going to take my tool here and get that nice and tight so it's not going anywhere. Now, very important too, every time you hang a light, you want to make sure you're attaching the safety cable. In a perfect world, our clamps aren't going to fail us, nothing's ever going to fall, but that's not the case. It's always possible that, maybe you didn't have your coffee that morning and you didn't tighten this down all the way, or you have it set up in a way where kids can bump into the stand, like this is a floor stand here. So you just want to make sure that's super secure. So you have a little metal cable like this with a carabiner on the end. You want to put it usually through the yoke is what I like to do. Some lights will have a specific spot for attaching it, and you just clip it on. So that way, if for some reason your C-clamp here does fail, you have this to catch the light and keep it from fully falling on the ground. So next up, now that our light is hung, we're going to need power. See if Mark can get a nice tight shot of this, but you might see something like this connector here in your school. It looks a little funky. It's got 3 pins and it's kind of circular. So this is a twist connector. A lot of lights will have this connected to the light itself, or you might see the other end of this on your walls in your school. But not all spaces have that, so it's kind of, you might have this, or your light might just have a regular kind of plug on there that you see on everything else. And this is just an adapter that's going from that twist lock to a regular plug, and we're going to plug it into our dimmer. We'll chat about what a dimmer is, how to use them, that kind of stuff later, but basically we're just plugging it into power. Now, one other thing that's important to keep in mind when you're hanging lights, so we've got it secure here, it's got power, but you don't want to leave this cable just hanging like that. You'll see that when I let it hang, it's kind of putting tension on this outlet here. It's kind of pulling it out. For best practices, you don't want to be doing that. You might cause some long-term damage, and if somebody trips or something, depending on how you have it set up, if something gets caught on that cable, you don't want them to be accidentally pull it out of the outlet. If you just tie it to the pipe like that, if you do get some kind of strain on this cable now, it's going to pull here, it's not going to pull here. Just a little tip to keep things clean as well. So this fixture here that we just hung is a Fresnel, and we're going to talk about the different types here. There's 3 kind of main types. But once you have your fixture hung, on the sides you're going to have these little adjustment to loosen it up, and that will let you move your fixture up and down, and then you can tighten that back up, and now you have your light pointed. Something you might also have noticed is I actually tied this a little short. You want to make sure your cable is long enough so that when you loosen that and you move your light up and down, that this is not putting too much strain on the connection at the light. You don't want to ever be pulling too hard on this because, again, that's how you kind of damage things long term. So there we go. We have our light hung. I set this up ahead of time, so it should just turn on for us. There we go. And so this is a Fresnel, and kind of the idea with a Fresnel is it's a very general wash, like you'll see on camera there. It doesn't look quite the same on camera as it does in the room, but you'll see that it's very kind of diffused on the edges. In person, the edges are even softer. It doesn't really have a hard end. It just kind of gets softer as we get farther from the middle. And that is kind of in part that Fresnels have a unique lens. If you ever have the chance to look up close at a Fresnel lens, you'll see the glass is almost like in a stepped configuration, and that's what gives it that nice, like, smooth diffusion. And just so you know, when you're chatting with people about lights, I know it's spelt Fresnel, but it is said Fresnel. It's a French guy that invented the type of light, lens on the front. So just something to keep in mind, just so you know what you're talking about. Most Fresnels will have a zoom of some type. This Fresnel here is an older strand. You might actually have one of these around your school. And this specific model has the zoom down here, and you can just move that back and forth. And what that's doing is it's actually moving the lamp inside forwards and backwards. And you can see on the screen there, or on the cyc, nice and small, and we go all the way out, and it gets nice and big. So Fresnels are great as like a general wash. You just want some light on your stage. You don't want it to have harsh edges. They're pretty point and shoot. You just set your zoom, and you're good to go. So that's kind of it for a Fresnel. But the other type of light we have on the stand here, the next one over, is a par. And on camera, again, this looks a little different than in the room, but you can see this one compared to the Fresnel. The Fresnel has this, so this is back to the Fresnel now. It's got this nice soft edge. When we go over to the par, the edge is a little harsher. So that's just kind of one of the differences between those fixtures. They're still great for washes, for washing an area. They could be good for kind of effects lighting, maybe like up a wall, that type of thing. But you will typically not find a zoom on a par. A par is kind of just a set it and you're good to go. And then our third type of light that we have up here, oh, I'm going to turn off that logo there, is ellipsoidal, a spot. They have a couple different names. Some people call them LECOs. So the idea with this specific type of light is that you're getting a very sharp edge. As you can see there, there's not a whole lot going past that edge. Another kind of main characteristic of a spot like this is that it has shutters. So if you'll see on this fixture, it's kind of got these little metal bits that stick out on the sides, the top. There's 4 of them. And if I move that and I push it in, you'll see it's adjusting the image. So that can be really great if you're trying to, focus on a set piece, or maybe you want to have a nice square around a podium, just kind of shaping it to however you're using it. And then another characteristic, I'm going to have to go around to show this part, but another characteristic of a spot is that it actually will have either a removable or adjustable lens. So this specific one has a little bolt on the bottom, and when I loosen that, I can slide the lens in and out to adjust the focus. And if I wanted to, I could take that lens off and put a different one on. So compared to your PAR and your Fresnel, those are not going to have removable, changeable lenses, but your spot typically will. Some spots will have a fixed lens, but they will still have the option to change your zoom as well as your focus on the bottom part. So that's kind of the main overview of those 3 types. That was kind of a quick overview, but they all have slightly different purposes, different ways of being used. On the end here, we have a different PAR. The main reason I brought this PAR out is it's just kind of different looking than this one, but it's the same type, even though they have quite different body shapes. That one is a PAR 64, is a fairly common PAR for its time. It's a little older now, but you might have one of those sitting around in your supply closet in your school. So that's kind of what that guy does. And you'll see, even though it is a PAR, it's a slightly different shape or a different look. So even within the family of one type of fixture, you might have slightly different effects, or different beam. But generally your PAR is still going to have a bit of a sharper edge. And you can tell this one doesn't look too great. It is definitely one of the older ones that we have up here. But if it's what you have, you can still definitely make that work. So when we're talking about types of fixtures, another thing to keep in mind is if it's a conventional source or conventional lamp versus an LED. So an LED is this guy here, and I got a texture, a gobo in there right now, but I'll take that out. And so the idea with an LED is that you have your red, your green, your blue, maybe an amber or a lime, little LEDs within the light. And when you do your color from your console, it's going to adjust how much of the red is on, how much of the blue is on, and that's how you get your different colors. With a conventional, I'll go back to this, back to the spot, it's just on or off, right? It's just a lamp in there. You can adjust how much power is going to the lamp, and that's all you can really do from the console for a conventional. So to control those, it's a little different. Your conventional needs to be plugged into something like this. This is a portable dimmer pack. As you can see, I have it C-clamped and safetied here, just like I did with the lights. Some schools might have this, maybe like in your drama room. On your pipe, you might just have this little box hanging, and that's where I plugged in my power for the first light that I hung. So this is connected with a data cable. Down here you'll see this little DMX cable that's connected to the console. So the console is basically saying, hey, this outlet here, let's turn that on and off. This is number 1. So you're controlling the voltage going to the bulb inside the light itself. Whereas on an LED fixture, you plug your power directly into the light. The light has an internal power source as opposed to an external one, like the dimmer. And it's kind of all built in there, and you have your data plugged in as well. So it's kind of just a different level of control and a different way of running things. Something important to note, you cannot plug, or you should not plug an LED fixture into a dimmer. An LED fixture does not like the change in voltage that you get from a dimmer. LED fixtures are kind of wired and set so that they get, full 120 volts at all times, whereas your dimmer is going to adjust the voltage, and that's how you get the different brightness. So just something to kind of keep in mind. You might not have a portable one like this if you have, a larger theater, gymatorium type setup. You might have actually a rack or something mounted to the wall on the side of your stage, and that goes out maybe to outlets throughout the theater, throughout the space, and that's where you plug your light in. This is just kind of a smaller portable version. So something to keep in mind when you're plugging in your lights. Is it conventional? If so, you want a dimmer. If it's an LED, then you're good to just plug it into a regular wall outlet. So I've talked about the different lights. Now, how do we use them? What are kind of like, the basic things you can do with them? For this part, I'm going to mostly talk about the spot because you can do the most with that. Like I said, your Fresnel, all you really have on there is a zoom. Your par, you just kind of point and shoot. On your spot, you do have the option to adjust your focus. So we'll chat about that. Although I should note that there is a barn door, is what they're called. It's kind of an accessory you can put in front of different fixtures. This one would be great for a par. Unfortunately, we don't have one that fits into this conventional par with us at the moment, but the idea with this is it's got this little lip that I'm not showing very well on camera. Basically, this slides into the front of your light. You'd have your source back here, and then you can use these little pieces here to adjust and kind of block out light to direct it in different ways. So the idea there being, if you have something kind of like a par or a Fresnel, and you want to really limit where your light is going, you don't want it maybe going onto the curtains, or you want it kind of stopping at the bottom of the stage, you could put a barn door on it and just kind of adjust it to get that light blocking. So, for spots, let's see, that's that one there. You have a bit more in terms of options for focusing. So like I mentioned earlier, you can slide your lens forwards and backwards. This specific one has a little bolt on the bottom, so if I release that, and you'll see that as I slide it out, hopefully this looks like something on camera, but as I slide it out, the edge gets really soft, and when I slide it closer in, you can find just that sweet spot where it gets nice and sharp on your edge. So that just gives you some flexibility depending on how you're using it. Maybe you want it to be a really sharp edge, maybe you're going to use it right in the center of your stage, and you want that really dramatic effect. But maybe you only have spots and you want to wash your whole area with spots. If that's the case, then maybe you want to put your lenses in that position where they're a softer finish. And that also applies with, a softer beam. And that also applies with the shutters. So you can set your shutter with it nice and tight, and then you can just pull it out, and now that edge is nice and soft. So that's just kind of the idea behind setting those up. Something to keep in mind, which I am now experiencing, conventional lights, because they have a old school bulb in them, they get quite hot. So if you're going to be messing around with your lens, your shutters, that kind of thing, just keep that in mind. Maybe not something you want younger kids touching, because this has only been on for a couple minutes and this back end here is quite toasty. So just something to keep in mind for safety reasons. Let's see, where am I now? So another thing you can do, and you probably saw it in there in this other spot when we first started, is there's these really neat things called gobos. So a gobo most commonly is a thin piece of metal, and I have a couple of them up here. So the idea with a gobo is you can have either kind of a texture, and it's called like a breakup gobo, or you can get ones that do a specific image. So if Mark can get these, like this one, oops, I have that backwards. This one here is kind of just a texture. You can do some fun things with that, maybe put it out of focus, so you just have something interesting as a backdrop. Whereas this one here, you'll see is actually like a little image or little scene. I think this one it's called Tower Bridge. It's kind of a London Bridge vibe, or London Bridge look. Another one here that's a snowflake, or snowflakes. And then one of my favorites is just some trees. You can do a lot with these, like evergreen, palm trees, that kind of thing. And so those can be a really effective way to get some visuals on your set, on your backdrop, without spending a lot of money and building a whole tree. You can just go get like a $15 little piece of gobo, piece of metal, slide that in there, and now you have a tree in your backdrop. So for using those, you got the little sheet of metal, the gobo, whichever one you decide to use, oh, excuse me, for your production. And you're going to need a gobo holder. It's kind of self-explanatory. It holds the gobo. There's a couple different sizes. I think all of the ones I have up here are A size. So different fixtures will take different sizes. If you're not sure what size your fixture takes, you could probably find a spec sheet or something on the manufacturer's website with the details. And if you're not sure, you can always give us a call and we'll help you figure that out. I want to make sure you're buying the correct gobo. So to use a gobo, you're going to have an accessory slot. This top part of the light, of the spotlight, has kind of a little opening that you're not going to find on the sides. And that's how you know your light is up, facing the right way. But you just drop that in there, and now you have that filtering your light. And the same thing applies for this spot as the other spot. Because it's a spot, you can move your lens back and forth, and you can focus it nice and sharp, or you can kind of, if you want maybe more of a texture, maybe you want to keep it a little less focused, and so that kind of gives you some options for messing around with that. I'm going to put it nice and in focus for now, and then we're just going to tighten down that bolt again so that lens is not moving on us. So that's kind of it for gobos. They're pretty straightforward. There's some other versions as well. There's also glass gobos. Those are a bit more expensive. And you can get custom gobos. So you might have noticed when we first started, let's see, I had this on the screen. So this is a custom gobo in that second light, that second spot there, with the Horizon logo. So that could be great for your school. Maybe if you want to, have your school's logo, your music, maybe your band has a logo or something, like your mascot, that kind of thing. And something to note with gobos when they have text is they actually go upside down. So, oops, there's the camera. You'll see this is actually in this holder upside down. And we put it in there, it then goes the right way. That same principle also applies to your shutters. So if we go back to this guy, if I go to adjust my shutter, if I take my bottom shutter and I push it in, it's actually cutting the light at the top, right? And if I go and I push in my right shutter, the left side is what's actually changing. So there's something to keep in mind when you're up there messing with shutters. If you're maybe not allowed to go up on a ladder, you're sending up your facilities person, you're working in a team to get your focus set, just important to remember you kind of want to move the opposite shutter to where you want the light to cut out. So the next thing we should chat about is you got gobos, but what if you only have a conventional spot like this one here and you want color, right? Maybe you put a gobo in there and you have like a snowflake or something and you want it to have color. So another great tool for your lighting design or lighting setup is gels. So these ones here are all in cardboard holders, but there's also metal versions of these. Quick tip, when you're setting up your gels, so these come in big kind of sheets and you cut them to size to fit these little holders. It's a good idea to mark what's in there. They all have different names, numbers. So this is an R15, this is an R65. If you do start kind of building up an inventory of these across different productions, different shows through your school year, it's a good idea to label them. That way you know what you're looking at when you go back to pull things back out. Actually, I'm going to show this with the LED, but we're going to just set it to white, just so I don't have to deal with the hot, because that one has gotten quite toasty, that conventional. So we'll set that back to white. And I'll leave the gobo in there. But let's imagine this is just a conventional and we want some color. Maybe we're going to go for this blue. So in the front of the light, front of the fixture, there's a slot, and this just kind of drops in there. And it's got a little hinge, spring-loaded hinge that drops down, and that holds it in. So that way if it's up in the air, you don't have to worry about it, falling on people. And now you can see we have our light is blue. So even if you only have conventional fixtures, you can still do a lot. You can still have some fun looks with different colors. You just got to throw a little piece of gel in there. One thing to keep in mind is gels can get heat damaged, so can gobos actually. Like I said, these conventional fixtures get quite hot. So if you're putting a gobo or a gel, that kind of thing, in your spot, just keep that in mind that it's in there, and maybe don't leave it on for extended period of time. This one doesn't have any damage, but when they do start getting damaged, you'll notice in the center they might start to lose some of the color. This one's a little wrinkly. That might actually be from heat, because that can happen over time. So just something to keep in mind once you have a gobo and or a gel in there. You don't want to just be leaving the light on for the sake of having it on. So in the same vein as color gels, you also have these fun ones. And I know they just look like clear plastic, and they kind of are just clear plastic, but they're specific types of plastic. And so these are different types of diffusion. And so you'll have something of maybe more of a frost. And if you look at this one, it's got kind of a texture to it, and that's why it's called more of a frost. You can get some really, really heavy diffusion, like this one that you can barely see through. And these all kind of will give you different effects. These are all different numbers. Again, you'll see we got 115, 132, 114. And so they can also kind of help create some fun effects or some differences. Like you'll see with this one, this is such a heavy frost that when I put it in there, we lose all kind of definition of that gobo. It just turns into a wash. But if we put in maybe a 132, you should still be able to get some definition, but it's kind of softened and blurred all of those edges. A little bit of a different visual effect than if you were to just take your lens and slide it in or out. And those are really helpful as well if you don't have a gobo in there and you want a nice kind of wash with your spot. If you mix that with kind of adjusting your lens, it doesn't look as good on camera as it does in person, but that'll get you even softer than just using the lens. So there's really a lot of options in terms of accessory type things that you can drop in to customize kind of the look of the beam, the color, all that fun stuff. And yeah, Jordan, do we have any questions in the chat so far? Because if you guys do have any questions, feel free to jump in on Teams and Jordan will relay them.
No questions so far.
Okay, that's totally fine. So now we know kind of what our fixtures are, what they're for, how to use them, but like how do you really use them? How do you set them up, right? There's kind of a couple different main positions you want to put your lights in. If you only have a handful of them, you're probably going to want to just put them kind of far out in front of your stage, maybe left, right, both sides. If you have a pipe above, great. That's a good spot to hang them. You can also put some lights on the sides in your wings to kind of create different effects, create some shadows going from the side. And then you can also put lights along the cyc pointing up. You can kind of see them on camera. We have some cyc lights in here that point straight up, and that will just kind of light the background. You can use pars for that even with some nice heavy diffusion, some frost or something like that. So there's some options there, but the main positioning you want to put your lights, you really want to focus on if you only have a couple, is going to be that kind of middle of the room pointing at your stage, just washing the stage. So in terms of positioning those, personally for more theatrical type things, what I like doing is using an odd number of lights. And the reasoning for that is that say you only have 3 lights, you have one to the center, one to the left, one to the right. That gives you some options in terms of where your students or your talent on stage is. If you have somebody just in the center, then you can light just the center. If you do just 2, it's kind of a left or a right. So keeping in mind kind of how you might want to break up your stage during the production. If you have somebody that's going to be doing a monologue, kind of maybe standing on a certain set piece in one corner, maybe you want to hang a light in a way that's focused, nice and sharp on that set piece. Maybe have a kid stand there while you're doing your focus so that you make sure it's not, you don't want your light to get cut off like here or here. You kind of want to aim a little bit above their head. So that's kind of important to keep in mind. Like, do you need special lights during your production? Do you have, moments where you want to have just one really dramatic look as opposed to just always having the full stage wash on? So just kind of keeping in mind what you need for your specific show or production. So yeah, that's pretty important when you're doing your setup, when you're doing your focus, to keep in mind. And you can have a quite effective setup or look with maybe just five lights, something like that. Maybe you put a gobo in one, you use 2 to wash the stage, and then maybe you have 2 specials, one with a blue gel, one with a red gel, and suddenly now you have your whole stage washed, you have a texture in the background, and you have kind of 2 different colors of mood lighting. And what you could even do is you can have a blue light, or a fixture with a blue gel, a fixture with a red gel, and you turn them on at the same time, and you get kind of a purple wash. So now, those 2 fixtures, you have 3 different colors you can kind of mess with on your stage. So there's a lot of kind of interesting things you can do with kind of a smaller amount of fixtures. You don't need a large assortment of fixtures to get some really effective looks. So that's all great, but how do we control it, right? We have lights set up. They're pointed in good spots. They got some cool gobos, some effective gels for your production, but you need to control them. So we're not going to go super in depth on how to use the console necessarily. I'm more just going to kind of do some general terms, some general concepts that are important to keep in mind. Different consoles will have different names for some things, potentially, but it's good to have a general understanding of these types of things so that if you do give us a phone call, you're chatting with your colleagues, that type of thing, you're using the right words so everybody is on the same page. So, first thing that we should chat about quickly is patching. I'm not going to go in depth on patching. In theory, you should have a space where your fixtures are kind of already set up for you to a certain degree. And then maybe it's just a matter of you going in and refocusing them for each production, but they're kind of hung, and the data control is probably, hopefully, set for you already. It is important to kind of keep in mind that your address, so your address is like the data side of things. Typically, your dimmer pack or your LED fixture itself will have the address either set on the fixture or set on the dimmer pack. It's a DMX address. It's essentially like where the fixture lives, in a way. And that is not the same as your channel, your console channel. On your console, it'll say, channel 1 up, down, like I'm doing here, channel 1, channel 2, it kind of goes across. That's not the same as your DMX address. Those are 2 kind of different things. I'm not going to go super in depth as to like all the theory behind that, but just know that the number that you might see on the back of an LED fixture is not going to be directly correlating to the number of the fader you need to move up and down to turn that light on and off. If you do have questions in terms of how do I set up a patch, I have these lights and my console has no file on it and I don't know how to set them up, we can definitely talk about that, but that can get a little more complicated and it can be a little specific to the fixture type or maybe the console type. So we're not going to get too detailed into that, but just know that there's a such thing as the address for either the fixture or the dimmer, and then you have a channel on your console. So on your console, most consoles, at least digital consoles, will have 2 different types of data you can record. So you'll have submasters, and then you'll have cues. So the idea with a submaster is typically you would save that to a fader. So when you bring up your fader, it just brings up that combination of lights. It'll bring up, if it's an LED, it'll bring up the colors that you set it to. Maybe if you have a nicer fixture that has digital, like a zoom controlled by DMX, your submaster will contain all that information. So basically you just set everything how you like it, and you record that into a submaster that you can put on a fader, and you can just bring it up and down all together. And I find that really useful in different spaces to have at least one submaster that's just all your lights on. That's useful if you're setting up your set design. You have somebody coming in to maybe set up like a larger group, that kind of thing. You just need lots of light. You can just turn that one fader up, all your lights are on, you're good to go. So that's kind of one type of recorder data that you can do. The other type that a lot of kind of theatrical productions will use is called a queue. So the idea with a queue is that you build something called a queue stack, or it's almost like a playlist, really, if you want to kind of phrase it differently. And you're basically going to set a look. You're going to say, for my opening scene, I want maybe all of my lights on, just kind of dim, while everyone's coming in and taking their seats in the audience, or maybe I want it completely black. So you would set that, you would record that as Q1, and then your next cue might be, Act 1, Scene 1, your actor is walking out onto the stage. That would be your second cue. And most consoles, if not all consoles that let you record cues, will have just a little play button. And the idea with that is that once your production starts, you would have, a student or somebody sit behind the console, and they would just hit play and just go, go, go as they, go through the production. And that makes it really simple to have the same looks that you had in rehearsal, the same intensity, the same colors, kind of accurately recalled throughout the production, so the folks on stage aren't like, why is that light on, and getting distracted by things like that, to keep it all nice and consistent. Another kind of important piece of terminology is blackout. So some consoles will have a blackout button. Other consoles, maybe you want to record a blackout cue, that kind of thing. But when someone's referring to blackout, it's just everything's off. So you black out your stage, turn everything off. That's quite a common theater term, and kind of ties into the controlling your console side of things. So that's kind of the majority of what I was going to go over today. We've talked about fixture types, kind of what the three different main types can do, what the differences are. Looking specifically at spots, we've talked about gobos, gels, diffusion, three really helpful tools for customizing the way things look, as well as your barn doors, which are very helpful. We've talked about, kind of controlling your console, keeping in mind if conventional versus LED and how it's getting power, because that is quite important. Again, I just want to reiterate, because it can damage your fixtures. You do not want to plug your LED fixtures into your dimmer. If you're not sure how your theater, your gym, your drama room is wired, and you want to be sure, feel free to give us a call, or call whoever it is that installed it, or who did the wiring in there, and they should be able to let you know if certain outlets are on dimmers or if they are just regular wall outlets. I do want to mention that we're going to be sharing a glossary of kind of just basic terms. I believe Jordan might be sharing that in the Teams chat at some point today. And if you would like a copy of that too, you can always just shoot us an email and we can send that over. But that kind of has just a breakdown of some of the terms that I've talked about today. I do want to mention as well, upcoming at 1:30, so in about 20 minutes, we have Jordan coming up here, and he's going to be talking about all of the basics of audio, microphones, DI boxes, cable types, all that fun stuff. And next Tuesday at 7 p.m., we have another live stream. That's going to be our regular Resource Stage seminar, and that is going to be mixing audio for online versus in person, kind of talking about why does it sound different on the stream than it does in the room, and what you can do to effectively mix for a stream. On January 30th and April 24th, we're going to be doing the exact same 2 study hall sessions. So if you have colleagues, friends who you think might, find this information useful, or you would like to listen to this again because maybe, you were marking papers and you missed a couple little details, feel free to tune in for those. We do sell and rent the majority of the equipment I've talked about today. So if you want to try something out, see how it might work in your school, get a price to upgrade maybe to LEDs and talk about some budget type things, feel free to reach out to us and we can chat about that as well. And if you're really, struggling, scratching your head, don't even know where to start, feel free to reach out as well. And we also are more than willing to come out and do on-site training with you to talk about all these fun lighting setup options with your students or with your teachers. So if that's interesting to you, reach out as well. Do we have any questions in the chat? Teams has been pretty quiet. That's all right. Well, so that's kind of it for me with lighting. Stick around though. In 20 minutes, we're going to get started with Jordan and some audio basics. Thank you and have a great day.